Well, first and foremost, congratulations on your new role as acting chair. It's very exciting. In your confirmation statement, you said, and I'm going to read this verbatim to make sure I get it right, "We must refocus and change direction with new leadership to fulfill our statutory mandate to promote responsible innovation and fair competition in our markets." What does that vision actually look like for you? And specifically, how do you balance fostering innovation while ensuring fair competition and market integrity in a rapidly evolving space like digital assets?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's great to be here at this conference, especially because I was just saying backstage, I think this is the first time as acting chairman that I've publicly spoken about our digital assets agenda. So it's pretty exciting to be here, and thanks so much for having me. I think the key aspect of what I wanted to come right out and signal when I became acting chairman is that it is a change. We are going to be making a change from the policies of the last few years. And key to that is what I have almost been repeating as a mantra the entire time that I've been a commissioner and now as acting chairman, which is it's back to basics. The CFTC has a pretty simple mandate. We are here to ensure that we have well-functioning markets that are deep and liquid and enable our market participants to hedge their risks. We oversee risk transfer markets, as former Chairman Chris Giancarlo has said many times. Hello. And key, though, in the ability of the commodity derivatives markets to enable that risk transfer is the fact that we are innovative. A lot of times people talk about some of the changes that are going on in our markets, whether it's digital assets or prediction markets, which is something else I've spoken a lot about. And I say, this type of change and having new asset classes or new underlyings is not that dissimilar to when the CFTC back in the 70s expanded the scope of our markets not just from physical commodities like wheat or grain, oil or gold, but to financial commodities. The thought of having interest rates or indices as commodities back then was very revolutionary, and now if you think about it, those are the largest markets that we oversee when you think of the 400 trillion notional derivatives markets. So to me, I think it's just a natural evolution, although it is sort of another Cambrian explosion of how our markets are changing to fit today's day and age. But otherwise, it's back to basics. It's fairly simple. We have a principles-based regulatory framework. What that means and the benefits of having a principles-based regulatory framework is that we are more able to quickly adapt and anticipate to new and emerging risks or developments, technological innovations, and so on in our markets. So I don't know that it really changes so much what we do, but what I do think is key to what new leadership and a new change in direction is how we approach the issues of the day. And so one of the things that I talked about during one of my first senior staff meetings as acting chairman was that to me, I'm going to be guided by the 3 M's. First is mission. Is this our mission? 2, markets. Does this serve the markets? And 3, mindset. Are we approaching this with the right mindset? Do we have an open mindset? Do we have a growth mindset? So I think being guided by these 3 M's, that's how we're going to ensure that we're balancing promoting responsible innovation while also ensuring fair competition, market integrity, and protecting our market participants.
Awesome. You recently announced a series of roundtables that you'd like to do on the evolving trends like market structure, conflicts of interest, and more particularly digital assets. Given the wide variety of stakeholders in this room and potentially watching the live stream right now in the digital asset industry that are present here today, can you just elaborate on what type of key insights you would like to gather from these discussions, and are there any specific issues that you are particularly keen to learn about or address?
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's been fun about my 3 weeks, I think, as acting chairman is I have told people that if you want to know what I'm going to be doing, we'll just look at everything I've been saying for the last 2 years, and if I said it, that means I'm going to go and try to do it now. And roundtables and public engagement in an open and transparent way is, again, part of getting back to basics. That's what we here as public servants are meant to do. We are here to engage with the public. We are here to hear from the public because that's one of the core foundations of being in a democratic country like the United States. It's a participatory democracy, and so that's why it's so important to me that we have roundtables as structured, open, and transparent forums for the public to come and share their views with us, to have input into the policymaking process, because it's inconceivable to have a government where we're going to mandate the laws and the rules that you have to live by every day, and yet you have no voice or no say in the matter. To me, that's just un-American. So the roundtables are very key to that. And the key thing with these roundtables, again, being part of the government, is that there are rules by which we make policy. Part of that is that we need to have a rational basis for what it is that we do, particularly when we are changing our policies or embarking upon a new area of policy. And part of having a rational basis for what we do means that we are having input from experts. We have data, we have studies. All of those things are part and parcel of having a rational basis for why we do things. So a roundtable is very important because our participants in this roundtable, and just members of the public, will be able to submit comments. Again, we will hear from experts, we will hear from stakeholders such as industry leaders, technology providers, those who are actually building and participating and shaping these markets, as well as from other interested stakeholders like public interest groups. So it's designed to bring everybody to have a seat at the table and to be able to contribute. That's really the key thing, is because I feel that many of the policies of the past several years have not, in fact, been data-driven. They've not been taking an empirical look at the benefits of, and the risks, but the benefits in particular of technological developments like blockchain.
Fully agree. One of the key themes of the day is that we may be at a pivotal moment in the evolution of on-chain markets. As you know, Ondo is building out a platform to facilitate more issuance of tokenized assets and really bringing more institutions on-chain. The one thing that will need to happen, in addition to the technology and infrastructure, is just more regulatory clarity, right? And I know you've said this before, but can you share your thoughts on how the CFTC plans to support greater institutional participation in on-chain markets? And are there any specific things in the short term that you would plan to address?
So looking at having institutional markets in digital assets is something that I've been very particularly looking at since about 2016 or 2017, and I think we probably began talking about it when we were both at our previous firms.
That's right.
Possibly in 2018 or 2019, so it's been a long time coming. And when you think about the CFTC's role overseeing, again, the derivatives markets, this is where I think about what may very well be the killer app for blockchain technology in tokenized financial markets, which is collateral management. Collateral management is something that underpins the entire derivatives markets. It's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. Being able to enable new innovations like 24/7 trading, being able to reduce settlement, clearing, and other operational risk. All of those things are some of the benefits that have long been written about with blockchain technology. And so one of the key initiatives I wanted to do in my role as a commissioner was to sponsor the Global Markets Advisory Committee, which has a digital asset markets subcommittee. I've been so proud to be able to sponsor their efforts because in the last just over a year, actually, they've put forward a number of key recommendations which we will now be looking to implement at the CFTC under my leadership as acting chairman. One of those is a U.S. Digital asset taxonomy. This is really key because if you're going to be doing something, you all need to be on the same page and talking about the same things. And importantly, it will help to bridge our U.S. markets with the rest of the world who has been ahead of us, right? We have been left behind in this because we've been kind of in a food fight or something in the United States over this technology where it's become this battle between good and evil instead of just thinking that it's technology. Technology is not good or evil. So that's very important. Bridging the gap between the U.S. and the rest of the world, being a useful tool for U.S. policymakers to begin to understand what do we mean when we talk about digital assets and the different use cases for digital assets, including use cases in, again, tokenized financial markets, tokenized financial instruments, financial activity utilizing blockchain technology. The other very important recommendation that was one of the most recent GMAC recommendations is around the use of DLT to enable tokenized non-cash collateral. Again, one of the very simple use cases of that is stablecoins as collateral for derivatives transactions, being able to post it as a margin, whether it's initial margin or a variation margin in our markets. So that's something that I would actually like to pursue operationalizing. Again, consistent with direction that we receive from the White House and on our efforts with the President's Working Group on Digital Asset Markets. We recently had one of our first kickoff calls on that, and working closely together, of course, with the U.S. Department of the Treasury and with our fellow regulators over at the SEC, but looking at how to stand up, as I've called for, a digital asset markets pilot program to explore the use of tokenized non-cash collateral. And that could really be looking at our existing rules and regulations and seeing if there's any comfort that we may need to provide, whether it's through a letter or through some other key parameters or factors or criteria to be utilizing this in our markets. But I think that's a measure of regulatory certainty that we can provide in a pilot program that will then be a bridge to being able to use this in our markets on an everyday going forward basis, but after it's been carefully studied, after we've received the data to support that this actually minimizes risks, it's gone through a cost-benefit analysis, and so I do think that we will be looking at sort of the eligibility criteria for people to participate in this effort, and then we will be collecting the data and then publishing a report. So more to come, but I think that's going to be the most impactful first thing that the CFTC can be doing on our own in pursuing the President's agenda, and then, like I said, working together with all of our counterparts on the executive order for digital asset markets.
Yeah, I love that, because I'd love to just dive a little bit deeper on that recommendation on the use of tokenized non-cash collateral, because obviously for a company like Ondo Finance is the largest issuer of tokenized treasuries on public blockchains, that was kind of a big deal. So can you just elaborate a little bit in your own words why you think that recommendation is so impactful and what it will cause?
If you think about why use blockchain technology in institutional markets, like our institutional markets are fantastic. They are great. They work. There is, again, 400 trillion notional in derivatives in our markets. Every day, there are trillions and trillions of dollars in transactions, whether it's in the FX markets, the rates markets, credit markets, commodity markets, you name it, equity derivatives markets. All of the pipes and plumbing of the financial system work great today. But of course, could it be better? Are there ways that we could reduce OpEx for firms? Are there ways that we can reduce CapEx for firms? One of the things about Dodd-Frank, and I think one of the most important or impactful reforms of Dodd-Frank that most fundamentally reshaped market structure was actually not Title VII, which was the derivatives regulation, but it actually was the capital and margin requirements. Those are the things that really shaped who the key market participants were. It really shifted from being much more of a dealer market to being more diverse as far as market participants. You have alternative liquidity providers who now take up a very large portion of our market provision. And so since dealers have been constrained with their balance sheets, they're able to intermediate less and less. And so when you have this global hunt for scarce capital, when you have to look at every dollar of the activity that you're doing and figure out how much capital are you going to allocate towards that activity, that's where innovations like blockchain technology, being able to be more capital efficient, being able to reduce the time, for example, that you've got your collateral locked up in settlement processes, being able to reduce settlement fails, being able to mitigate all of those different risks and become more efficient. Those are real dollars and cents that are adding up, and it's a truly massive opportunity. And so that's why I think it's important to look at institutional markets and to look at something, I mean, honestly, this is actually a pretty boring topic. Collateral management is not the kind of thing that gets people very excited. Many of these are sort of middle and back office type functions, but it's critically important to our financial markets. Obviously, having come from a bank that was the pipes and plumbing and is the pipes and plumbing of the entire world, it's something that we saw and all banks see as a massive opportunity.
Well, for what it's worth, the people at Ondo Finance get very excited about tokenized collateral, so at least that's one group. I see some head nods in the audience. So. All right, shifting gears a little bit. I'd love to just get your take Is there anything right now happening in digital assets or the broader tokenization space that you are personally very excited about? And is there anything maybe happening that could even help your role in or support the mission of the CFTC to ensure fair and orderly markets?
There's many exciting things happening, but I think maybe the best way to address this is to talk about some of the near-term deliverables that we have and how we are approaching all of these issues, and then kind of talk about some of the perhaps next steps after we sort of do these near-term deliverables. So in the President's executive order, we do have a couple near-term deliverables. So within 30 days, we need to report upon all of our rules, regulations, orders, and other things that we've done as agency action that impacts digital assets. We are currently working on completing that inventory across the entire agency. I've also asked the Digital Asset Market Subcommittee of my GMAC to also work on doing that as well, so that way we can cross-check and basically make sure that we've got a good list that's been scrubbed and is comprehensive. That's one of the first deliverables that we'll be doing. After that, of course, there's another 60-day report, and then there's the 180-day report. So we are working on pulling all of this together in order to be able to meet those deliverables and to be able to contribute to the President's Working Group. We are also looking at bringing on board hopefully a couple senior advisors, crypto market structure experts that will be incredibly helpful to us. I have many former colleagues that have been wonderful resources. So looking forward to having some of these sort of temporary senior advisors that can help us with the crypto market structure. Besides that, like I said, in order to do initiatives like my tokenization pilot, we also will be looking to be deepening our bench of talent and bringing in industry experts who have actually built solutions or have led initiatives to deliver solutions. Those are going to be key skill sets that we need at the agency, because we don't really have that in the public sector. It's not to the same level, of course, as you have in the private sector. So that's going to be something very important. So there's just a lot of things that we need to do at the agency to enable this openness and this ability to truly understand and get in front of and create a forward-looking regulatory framework or structure for digital asset activities, or for generally just new technology in our markets. Besides doing tokenized collateral, again, so interesting, one of the top priorities, I think. Besides that, there's a lot of other interesting things that we could be looking at. Some of the other work streams that my Digital Asset Market Subcommittee has been working on have been utility tokens, for example. I actually think one of the things that may bring the most regulatory clarity the fastest is to identify, to define what is a utility token, and that it is not a security. That actually, I think, would bring a lot of clarity to a broad swath of the marketplace, and it's the approach that many other jurisdictions have taken as well. One of the other, and actually at the last GMAC meeting, there was a presentation from the utility tokens workstream, which is led by Chris Perkins, who's the president of Coin Fund and a former colleague of mine at Citi. And they've done a tremendous amount of work on thinking through a regulatory framework for utility tokens and how does that fit within the CFTC's jurisdiction. The other work stream, which has been led by a couple other of our subcommittee members, including Perry-Ann Boring, who's the CEO of the Digital Chamber of Commerce, is around NFTs. I believe that NFTs are not a security, they are things. And the CFTC has broad jurisdiction over commodities that are, goods, articles, services, interests, rights, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's another area where if I take a step back and think about what is the opportunity in Web3, what is the opportunity in creating either new, wholly native digital assets or digital assets that are a representation of something else, so whether it's the right to use something, to transfer something, or to use something, whether that is tangible or intangible, a lot of that is actually commercial activity. And so that brings me back to my first sort of threshold question, which is this a commercial activity or is it a financial activity? Because if it's a commercial activity, it's actually not going to be regulated by financial regulators. We have we have state regulation in the United States, we have the Federal Trade Commission at the federal level. And a lot of what's very exciting for how our lives are going to change on an everyday basis in a more digital world and in virtual worlds is actually in the commercial space. Think about the way NFTs are being used in sports or entertainment, in fashion, in media. All of that is very interesting. That's all being led by corporates, probably former clients of yours, I'm sure, and former clients of mine. And so that's something where I think we really don't want to inhibit that growth in those sectors that are not the financial sector. It's actually other sectors of the economy.
Awesome. Well, as time is flying by, I want to make sure that we do touch on DeFi, right? There is growing prominence, I would say, of decentralized finance. I don't know what the exact number is of capital in DeFi right now, but it is growing. So there's been some discussion on how that really should be regulated. The previous administration, I believe it's fair to say, tried to clamp down on DeFi in a wide variety of different ways. That caused quite the uproar in the DeFi community. What do you believe is the CFTC's role in regulating DeFi, and what do you think a good regulatory framework for DeFi would look like?
I think a lot of the issues of the past several years is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of DeFi, and then, of course, the appropriate way to regulate DeFi. When I first became a commissioner, and again, based on the work that I've been doing at Citi and in the private sector, I think maybe 2 or 3 months after I became a commissioner, I gave a keynote at NASDAQ's Technology of the Future conference, where I outlined 10 fundamentals for responsible digital asset markets, and none of those was like, this is DeFi and this is what we need to do about DeFi. Actually, what I talked about, besides common sense things like combating illicit finance and ensuring risk management and anti-fraud measures, is that we really need to appropriately use activities-based regulation versus entity-based regulation. And I think the challenge is that with DeFi, people have been trying to apply an entities-based regulatory approach to it, but there's not actually entities, are there, in DeFi? Not like that. Actually, what's more appropriate is an activities-based regulatory framework when you look at DeFi. One of the first examples I used in thinking about it is Napster. So for those of you who remember Napster, who were perhaps in college, as I was at the time with Napster, it's a peer-to-peer sharing network. How are you supposed to go and ask every college student to register as something when they're on Napster? That doesn't seem to make much sense. But you shouldn't be using the internet to do illegal things, right? And that's actually the approach that they took with file sharing and with the intellectual property and copyright and other issues, theft of intellectual property. So why would it be any different for any other internet activity? It isn't. That's how we regulate the internet. We regulate the activities that people do on the internet, and that's how I think about DeFi.
I love it. As a closing thought, it seems like right now there is more or less a historical burst of energy around the topic of digital assets. So in your opinion, how does the industry kind of avoid fumbling the historic moment and squander the promise that the next 2 to 4 years could really have? Do you have any parting thoughts or wisdom that you would share with the people here today?
Approaching things from a realistic and, dare I say, an adult perspective. Anybody who thinks that there's going to be something that involves money and doesn't have any rules or regulations that's not realistic. That's pretty ridiculous, right? So for those who think that there's going to be money involved and there's going to be no regulations whatsoever, that's not realistic. So I think just come to something with a reasonable approach that is something that makes sense, that isn't something where people immediately can poke a million holes in, and then you lose credibility. Because I think what has been most challenging for the digital assets industry is actually a credibility gap. There have been a lot of very bad actors, and there it's been appropriate to take very strong actions to pursue and to go after fraud. But fraud is fraud no matter what. You can't lie, cheat, or steal no matter what you're doing, whether it's digital assets or other things. And so the problem is that those fraudsters, people who are lying, cheating, and stealing people's money, that has given the industry, unfortunately, a bit of a bad rap. And so I think the industry has done such a good job, particularly in the last year plus, to rehabilitate the image and to make clear the difference between somebody who's just lying and stealing versus people who are really trying to build something innovative that's going to bring net a great deal of good to society, to the economy. So that's been really good progress, so let's not backslide on that amazing progress being made to close the credibility gap. So keep the momentum going and be realistic.
Love it. I want to really thank you for taking the time to join us on this stage today. It was incredibly interesting to hear your perspective on these questions, and I am personally very excited to see all the things that you can do as the acting chair.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.